Our gospel reading today is from Matthew, chapter 5, verses 13 to 20. And it is found on page 4 in the New Testament section of your Pew Bible. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." May God bless our understanding of these scriptures. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. I have a question for you. In your daily life, I want you to think about your daily life. At home, in your workplace, or at school, in the grocery store, the clothing store, or the hardware stores. Would people know that you're a Christian by your behavior? That's what Isaiah and Matthew are about today. If you re-listen to part of Isaiah, in the center section I'm going to focus on, they're concerned. Why do we fast? They're complaining to God. Why do we fast, but you do not see? Why humble ourselves, but you do not notice? How many have ever felt that God's not noticing them? Noticing all the good things they're doing? Felt underappreciated, unappreciated? I can't imagine there isn't anyone in this room who hasn't felt this way at one time or another. And the prophet Isaiah replies for God, "Look, you serve your own interest on your fast day and oppress all your workers. You fast only to quarrel and fight and to strike with a wicked fist. Such fasting as you do today will not make your voice heard on high." Being Christian isn't about sitting in this room. It's not. It's about learning. It's about Jesus. And it's about God. And Isaiah is clear in the ending to say, when you do this, when you loose the bounds of injustice, undo the thongs of the yoke, let the oppressed go free, and break every yoke, you share your bread with the hungry, and bring homeless poor into your house. When you see the naked, to cover them, and not to hide yourself from your own kin. Quote, the ending. Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, here I am. How often do people leave this sanctuary and do things that they prefer not to? Get grumpy, get cranky. I know I do. I'm sure you do too. We don't always act like Christians. And would people know that you're a Christian by your behavior? That's in your family, no matter how hard that is. In your place of work, in the community, in this church. How are you living your life? In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says, this is a quote, "You are the salt of the earth." He doesn't say, remember all its parables? You know, the kingdom of God is like a treasure that's been lost. You know, the kingdom of God is like. That's not what Matthew is saying. Matthew is saying, Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. Why? Wouldn't you wonder that if you just looked at that? Because we can kind of figure, oh, well, we know what it means. Because we know what salt is, right? We know what salt is? It preserves, it flavors, and it purifies. But in Matthew's time, and in Israel's time, it is a religious and symbolic act. In Numbers 18:19. Sorry, I haven't gotten this right away. Numbers 18:19. Think about what this is saying. All the holy offerings that Israelites present to the Lord, I have given to you, together with your sons and daughters as a perpetual due. It is a covenant of salt forever. Did you ever think salt could be used like that? It is a covenant between God and the Israelites. It is a covenant of salt forever before the Lord for you and your descendants as well. It is used for purification and sacrifices. It is, what other famous salt do you remember? Can anybody think of this? Famous salt. Who's? Lot, absolutely, you got it. Genesis 19:24. I finally got a big enough Bible up here that I can read. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. So salt has very different meanings depending on its context in the Bible. And what Jesus is defining us as is salt. We are covenant. We are means of purification and preservation and flavoring to this world. And then again, Jesus says, not like, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. Think about that. How many of you can claim that? We're coming to communion today. How many of you can claim that you are the light of the world, that you bring light to this world. Notice it doesn't say you should be light, and it doesn't say you should strive to be the light. It says you are the light. You are part of God's presence come into this world. Jesus says, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works. They see your good works. This is my commentary. And then we go back to the Bible. And give glory to your Father in heaven. Your good works aren't about you. They're about God. So if your good works are about God, then how do you think those times that you really don't want God to be watching, how do you think that reflects on God in this world? When you're arguing, when you're disrespectful, when you're unloving. I mean, we can go into Paul's fruits of the Spirit. But I think you know that. I want you to ask yourself, because I don't think we get it. I really don't think we get it, that we are the light. And I want you to reflect to yourself today and over the next week. What is your light? What is your light? What piece of God do you bring to this world? And what is its source? You may be a great administrator, and you think, wow, that's good. I'm good with figures. It's not about you. It's about God working through you. It's not about you. So when I'm short-tempered, and when I'm cranky, and when I'm less than kind, which every one of us can be, myself included, that reflects on God. So everyone here has something to bring to this table, something they need to focus on, to have strengthened, to have nourished, to have forgiven. What happens to us, I don't know if it happens all over the world, but it tends to happen to us in the United States, unless we're delusional. Okay? We tend to focus on everything we do wrong. We don't tend to focus on the fact that, oh, well, we really can do this okay. Yeah, I did a good job on that. When I worked with clinicians, it was amazing that they didn't know what they were doing right. I would say, well, look at the way you're talking. Look at your body posture. We don't think about those things. We only see our darkness. I want to share with you a story. This is a story called The Cracked Pot. And, not the cracked pot, The Cracked Pot. And I got it from storylovers.com. Pay attention. A water bearer in India had 2 large pots, each hung on each end of a pole, which he carried across his neck. So you can picture that, right? One of the pots had a crack in it. And while the other part was perfect and always delivered a full portion of water at the end of the long walk from the stream to the master's house, the cracked pot arrived only half full. For a full 2 years, this went on daily. Out to the well, back, half a bucket of water. Of course, the perfect pot was proud of its accomplishments. But the poor cracked pot, and this is where I think we can relate, the poor cracked pot was ashamed of its own imperfections and miserable that it was able to accomplish only half of what it had been made to do. After 2 years of what it perceived to be a bitter failure, it spoke to the water bearer one day by the stream. Quote, "I am ashamed of myself. and I want to apologize to you." "Why?" asked the bearer. "What are you ashamed of?" "I have been able for these past 2 years," now this is the pot again, "I've been able for these past 2 years to deliver only half of my load, because this crack in my side causes water to leak out all the way back to your master's house. Because of my flaws, you have to do all this work, and you don't get the full value for your efforts." The water bearer felt sorry for the old cracked pot, and in his compassion he said, "As we return to the master's house, I want you to notice the beautiful flowers along the path." Indeed, as they went up the hill, the old cracked pot took notice of the sun warming the beautiful wildflowers on the side of the path, and this cheered it some. But at the end of the trail, it still felt bad because it had leaked out half its load, and so again it apologized to the bearer for its failure. The bearer said to the pot, "Did you notice that there were flowers only on your side of the path, but not on the other pot's side? That's because I have always known about your flaw, and I took advantage of it. I planted flower seeds on your side of the path, and every day while we walk back from the stream, you've watered them. For 2 years, I have been able to pick these beautiful flowers to decorate my master's table. Without you being just the way you are, he would not have this beauty to grace his house. Each of us has our own unique flaws. We're all cracked pots. But if we allow it, the Lord will use our flaws to grace his Father's table. In God's great economy, nothing goes to waste. So as we seek ways to minister together, and as God calls you to the task he has appointed for you, don't be afraid of your flaws. Acknowledge them and allow him to take advantage of them. And you too can be the cause of beauty in his pathway. Go boldly, knowing that in our weakness, sound familiar from St. Paul? In our weakness we find his strength, and that in him every one of God's promises is a yes. We are all cracked pots. I remember this one client I had who was bulimic. She had an eating disorder. And tiny little thing, maybe 5 feet. Not overweight in any manner, shape, or form. Very pretty young girl. Tough nut to crack. Tough. She didn't believe anything. And one day I sat in that therapy session and said, "Well, have you pinged and purged this week?" And she laughed. Because I didn't say binge and purge. I said pinged and purge. She then knew I was human. And that helped her relate to me. God uses our faults. God uses our frailties. Confucius. Now this is the 6th century before Christ. Wrote that everything has its beauty, but not everyone sees it. And this, I would say to you, is a disservice to ourselves, the people we interact with, and to God. You don't overinflate who you are. But you shouldn't underinflate it either. You are who you are, and that's a gift from God. And God doesn't, remember that old saying, God doesn't make junk? And the other one, God isn't finished with me yet? God isn't finished with any one of us yet. We don't know it all. When we take Holy Communion in a few minutes, we will share the peace of God with one another. Why do we do that? It doesn't mean that we have to like one another. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that we have to love one another. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with one another. It doesn't mean any of that. It means that when we look into that person's eyes, if we can, even if we disagree with them, can see the light of God in them and realize that God may be working within them in a way that's very different from how God works within us. It means that we recognize that, well, God dwells within each of us. It helps us, before coming to the table, to let go of our human grudges and human agendas and come to this table for strength, reconciliation, and courage and nourishment. May it be so.